So the majority of my professional life before I became a therapist was as a dance educator and a choreographer. I had a dance theater company and here in LA. And before COVID, the last 7 years before COVID, my dance company was working with veterans.
Hmm.
And we offered free writing and movement memory workshops.
For veterans.
Yeah, for US military veterans, all ages. And we had writing sessions and movement sessions, and we had readings, and we had performances at different locations. And then we kind of culminated with this big piece called the Collective Memory Project, which we were in residence at the Ford Theaters for a couple of years. And then we shared an evening length work. And we had veterans performing on stage with the dance company.
Whoa.
And at the end of all that, we were sort of getting ready, conceptualizing the next project. And we were all sitting around one of the beautiful tables at the Ford Theater. And I asked everyone, including myself, what do you need? What do you think you need from the next stage of work? And I wrote down, I need more skills to how to deal with what's coming up emotionally. Because very quickly, early on, we started to realize what we were doing was incredibly evocative, provocative, emotional, vulnerable, and healing, actually.
Okay, first of all, that's surprising. So you have veterans who are coming into dance.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Well, move.
To move.
To move. I mean, it was dance. It is dance. I called it dance. But in order to get them in the door, sometimes I had to say move.
Dance might be too high of a bar, move. We can move.
It scared them off when I said dance. But of course, within seconds they were dancing because dancing is moving. It's pushing, pulling, reaching,
what would
turning.
happen for them when they started to move that made you think this is really evocative or something's coming up, something's kind of getting really maybe hot in the room?
Well, it was memory work specifically, right? So we were working with memory. And one of the veterans early on commented, because we would do these practices where we would write a memory and then we would move the memory, or we would hand the memory off to someone else and they would either rewrite it or move it. So there is this witnessing of someone else sort of moving your own memory, and then your memory of your own experience changes because you're seeing how someone else is interpreting it through their body or through even their own words, taking elements from the writing, speaking certain words, not speaking certain words. So one of the veterans early on said, memory making is relational, and it changes as you tell it and as you share it.
So it's one thing to have them, for example, describe a memory or write it down. And that's what we would say is kind of more the intellectual process. That's a left hemisphere kind of thing where you're making a causal string between things and you're talking about causation. This happened, then this happened, and this happened. And that's not the same as, let's say, emotionally processing trauma. And this is where I think it can be really interesting when we think about therapy, where we go, how much we end up talking about things versus allowing ourselves to actually experience something or to come close to the experience. And here, there's a really visceral way you're talking about these veterans who have this memory that, let's say, is important to them, emotional for them, even traumatic for them. And they might be in this kind of left hemisphere, more closed down way of experiencing that when they first, let's say, write it down, where they kind of are just trying to tell the story narratively. But then it becomes enlivened on the stage or whatever that room is when they're in.
Yeah.
And what would you see happen when people would start moving it around? What's different about it for them?
It's a kind of embodied way of processing experience. when we ask someone to move their own memory or to move someone else's memory and that person gets to witness, you see what things resonate, what imagery stays in the body, what gets released and passed over, where the body lingers
Yeah.
in certain positions, or imagery from the memory. And there's this embodied processing. It's a way of feeling um, change, not necessarily thinking it. It's not a
Yeah.
cognitive frontal lobe thing.
It's emotional.
It's more of an emotional and bodily release. Your body actually releases.
I think it's so important whenever we think about even thinking about emotions that they are embodied stances.
Yeah,
We can intellectualize even the word emotion and go, it's something that I just feel inside. It's not. It's your body readying itself
yeah,
for a certain stance, behavior, something. It's your body, just like when you get hungry, it has everything to do with you being ready to eat. You salivate, you feel your stomach gurgling. It is preparing you for a certain action.
it
And
is.
your emotion is like that. And so when you see it on stage and you're moving something around, something gets evoked in the person where they're not just intellectually remembering it, they're kind of hallucinating and pulling forth into their mind the experience of that event in a really
Mm,
fresh way.
mm.
You also talked about how they, at the end, were thinking about what do they need, or
Right.
can you think about
Well,
what was it like for them to do that?
yeah, that question. Um, you know, they all gave so much of themselves um, in the process of making art, and I wanted to ask them and all of us, you know, what if we're going to take this work to the next level? How is it going to enrich our individual journeys as humans? And what kind of support and what kind of strategies would make that come true for them? And I knew right away that if we were going to keep doing this work, I needed to have more skills to and language around what was happening therapeutically
Yeah.
in this creative work. I came to that work as an artist, not as a helper or healer in any way, but I knew that it was healing and helping work.
Yeah.
It was obvious. We talked about it every time we did it. So that's when I started the journey to become a somatic psychotherapist and
Yeah.
therapist.
And so I'm guessing there's something similar though, as you've started to see your own clients, or you see people going through the journey of experiencing their own emotions in the therapy room,
Yeah.
not in a dance or a movement
Yeah.
situation. I'm guessing there's a similar process that you see people go through
Hmm.
when they come in. And instead of veterans going, I'm going to talk about a specific memory, it's a person who, let's say, has some kind of somatic complaint. They
Hmm.
have whatever it is, IBS issues or panic attacks or
Yeah.
migraines. And I'm guessing there's a similar intellectual process that they're in about what they think
Yeah.
they need in order to heal versus from your own intuition
Well,
of what they need.
again,
Yeah.
there's a little not trickery involved, but so we as humans right now, we're communicating so much through our body. And in session, someone might be talking about something and I'm just sort of I'm tracking images, I'm tracking sort of themes, I'm tracking shapes. And because they're giving me that information as they talk, as they sit, as they
Hmm.
look. Um, and then maybe I'll just slow down. I'm thinking of one particular client that I had, and I see her actually virtually, which is pretty amazing that this can happen not even in the room.
Hmm.
They were talking about just an image that they have from a child. as a child, an experience that they had. And they were describing the physical posture that they were in. And I just sort of noticed that they had started to kind of go a little bit towards that posture. It was kind of like a hunched posture. And they just sort of leaned forward a little.
Yeah.
And then I just said, do you want to go into that posture now? Do you want to go into that position now? And they did. And I asked them to hold it for a while. And they said, this is so hard. This is so hard. But there was a lot of emotion coming
Mm.
out. And, this person specifically was dealing with
Yeah.
autoimmune disease that's really keeps them in bed sometimes for days. And, part of the process of healing for them was just being in the pain and accepting and getting into that position of defeat,
Mm.
which, but some of those immune diseases, just you feel so defeated. So to take the position of defeat and just hold it, it was incredibly liberating, incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
But major shifts from that session on around sort of accepting, rather than fighting
Because there
pain.
was another part of their mind that was there besides them just intellectually telling you what was going on. It's amazing to me how that person, as they were describing the experience, it became present to them. It's like they're hallucinating
You keep
that
saying
moment.
that word. What
Hallucinating.
do you mean?
It's their mind, their whole mind is simulating, re-simulating,
Mm,
remembering, re-putting
I
together
like that better.
the exact it was experiencing the exact neural circuits that were available
Yeah.
at that time, that were lit up at that time, and those same light bulbs in
Yeah.
their mind are going off. And so they're recreating that moment in the present moment
Love
with
that.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Remembering is great too with the dash because it's the
mhm,
body,
member.
the
Mhm,
member.
mhm. But what's fascinating to me about that is like it only in order for that to come up, it's like the mind knows that it's safe enough to do that. It's
Mhm.
like we only stay intellectual and we hold this barrier
Yeah.
that goes, I'm just going to talk about it, but I'm not going to feel it
Yeah.
until it feels safe enough to cross that barrier and to let it become re expressed, remembered
Yeah.
in our body because the safety. And what's amazing to me, and this Daniel Siegel talks about this, about how when we remember something, we don't separate the past from the present, meaning that their past experience is now kind of melding with this present experience of now she's hunching over, she's with you, and there's a different kind of experience relationally and emotionally where she's hunched over and she sees you
Yeah.
doing what? Being kind with her,
Sitting there right with her in that space where she was not held in that moment in
tuning
her
in.
memory, but
Yeah.
in this here and now,
Hmm.
you know, right there with her, feeling the pain with her, holding the space.
So now, whenever she has that troubling memory
Mhm.
in the future, she has bound that with this current experience of
Yeah.
Arianne being there safe with me. So as I think about this traumatic, hunched over sense, and now kind of also think about this person with me who let me know it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what she needed back then.
Well, that's part of the beauty of somatic
Hmm.
psychotherapy, really, right there, is that there's it helps you sort of soften the edges, soften, permeate into trauma.
Hmm.
So and then to think to feel that you can get through it actually,
Hmm.
that you don't have to get locked in the fight, flight, freeze, but you can actually feel. It's not about not feeling discomfort.
Hmm.
It's about feeling the discomfort, getting through it, coming back down through the stress cycle, shaking it out, being there, looking in someone's eyes. You're here. You okay? You made it through,
Hmm.
and then changing your relationship to trauma,
Hmm.
changing your relationship, your framework of memory.
Yeah. Um, it's amazing to me how much when we get trained as therapists, we focus all on the telling of the story and not much on this kind of experiential being with.
Yeah.
I can think of moments where similarly a client has assumed, as she's telling me about a memory, she assumes a certain position on the couch or in herself, in her body, and she's recreating this moment almost like she's offering it to me going, um, here's the just like in your dance class of here's the memory right here in front of us.
Mhm.
Let's move it around like Play-Doh. Let's
Mhm.
move it around to where we need it to be.
Mhm.
So that so there's a different memory, there's a different experience of that. I also think it gives agency. It's like
Mhm.
it's not just in the past, it's in the present, and we can do something with it. We can
Yes,
move it around.
it's malleable.
Mhm.
It's not static. Yeah.
Mhm.
One of the things you were talking about, feelings, as energies, that are signals for body responses. You know, a lot of somatic work is also moving energy, the emotional energy through the body in different ways, so that in different patterns, so that you don't always go to the immediate impulse reaction behavior.
Mhm.
Um,
Sometimes the problem is that there's a feeling and then a reaction right
yes,
away.
yes,
And when we move it around, we can create a pause and a
yes.
response, or responsiveness
Yep.
to the feeling.
It sounds funny or woo woo or strange to be like, "Oh, I feel when I feel fear, I feel it here."
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can't everything gets locked, might get hyperventilate, and then to kind of focus on that and then just to say, "Can we move that fear? Can we just move it a
Mm.
little bit over to the left shoulder? What happens if we do that?" The shoulder gets tight, but I can move the
Mm.
shoulder more than I can move my
Wow.
chest. It's
Yeah.
not locked. Okay, let's move that shoulder. Okay, let's okay.
Mm.
It's a different it's playful. It's imagination. It
Mm.
uses your imagination.
Mhm.
It activates the body in ways that people don't think about using their bodies.
Yeah. What's it like for you when you're in a moment like that? Because I'm guessing you feel it in your own body too.
Mm.
What are you doing in yourself in those
I'm
moments?
doing a lot of movement with them too. I mean, I do a lot. I mean, I just mirror what they're doing. Like, if they're doing this, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I find myself if they're, hugging, I'll hug.
Mm.
Um, and then, and then sometimes just being really close and attuned and kind of leaning in and being just close physically
Mhm.
in the room, separate but close. So they feel the peripheral presence of my body in the space, which I think is always number one calming, to just be close to another human and to know that there's another one there. As far as my own managing of my own stuff that comes up, um, that's what they teach you in school,
Mhm.
but just just really being present with the other person,
Yeah.
and my stuff I'll deal with when the hour
Yeah.
is over.
Right. I mean, I think about times when a client brings something up and it'll trigger a memory in me too. And it's kind of a judo move that you have to do because you go, what I don't want to do is block myself off and go, okay, I have to pretend as if this isn't affecting me.
Yeah,
At the same time, I also don't want to get overwhelmed and lost in my own thing, which is I think what you're talking about. If I have to deal with this, I have to know that I'm gonna be cared for. I'm gonna
yeah,
be all right. But there's another space too where I think this is what you're speaking about when you're saying tuned in to a client where you
yeah,
go, I've got to almost go, okay, so let's say a client's talking about time when they were really made to feel low. And then I remember what it's like to feel low.
yeah,
I picture myself like almost like getting next to them,
yeah,
like the
yeah,
child in me and the
yeah,
child in them, kind of both knowing what it's like.
yeah,
And it helps me to kind of tune in or to even simulate in myself of what's happening for me
yeah,
as I'm tuning into what's happening for them. I think there's a lot of humanity that we experience when we actually tune in. Like you said, it's not just cutting off. There's a part of us that tunes right into the part of us that knows what it's like to feel that. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. It's very human. It's very primal.
Mhm.
I,
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
there's
know
like a
what's
maybe
the
like a lie of like going like, okay, when they're experiencing trauma, there's their trauma over there. And then I'm I'm the therapist
Yeah.
and I'm going to help you, instead of going like we become people who both know as humans what it's like to feel something like this.
Yeah.
And when I enter in like this with you, it's kind of the same thing as a parent that I can think of times when my kid feels dejected or sad or something. And I'll literally say to them, like, I know just what that feels like. Like
Yeah.
I remember a time when I and it's helpful to them to go
Yeah.
like, dad is like right here with
Yeah.
me. He gets it.
I remember one of my professors talking about working with teens in a center, and one of his clients got really pissed at him and was sort of like, "You're such a jerk," you know? And he was like, "I am a jerk.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're right. I am such a jerk," you know? And I loved that because that's what you're talking about. Like, yeah, I am. I'm asking you to do something you really don't want to
Uh-huh.
do, and
Uh-huh.
it's hard.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. There's, I think it's a really, really needed approach, and it's something that I see, um, present, uh, in lots of clients who experience anxiety. You know, if if I ask somebody about their anxiety, right away, they're gonna point to a somatic complaint. They're gonna talk about tightness in their chest.
Yeah.
They're gonna talk about, trouble sleeping, calming down,
Clenching in the I always hear about like
clenching.
a vice in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squeezing here, squeezing
Squeezing,
here.
they can't calm down, they fidget, like
Mhm.
so there's all kinds of ways that already their body is doing the talking
Yeah.
that they're trying to listen to and go, "There's something off here."
Yeah.
Um, and yet I think sometimes they're afraid of it. They're afraid of those symptoms.
Yeah.
They're afraid of what it is and they just wanna take it away, and I think it's such a different approach here to go, actually, how do we tune into that and come closer to those experiences as something that's gonna point you
Yeah.
towards
You have to
healing?
work really slowly and really carefully
Mhm.
because it's real pain that they're feeling, you know? And yeah, that's one of the things too with the work that I think sometimes is not misleading, but the idea that they'll come in and they'll have something that they'll do and it'll go away, you know, somatic exercise and we're gonna and then it'll be like I'll be free of
Mhm.
whatever this discomfort is. But actually what we're doing is we're slowly titrating into the pain to stay in it a little longer and to find different ways to be in it rather than just overtaken,
Mhm.
um, or to fight against it. So it's not some I mean, you do feel relief in incremental ways. Um, I've had clients say, "Oh, well, is it common that after we do our work, like, that people get a little dizzy?"
Mm.
You know, because you're literally dealing with discomfort in new ways, and so your body and your mind are like, "What?
Yeah.
This is new."
Yeah. I think we wish, right? We wish that as soon as I start talking about it, the pain's gonna subside. But I think we all kind of intuitively know that when we go on some kind of journey that actually involves change, it usually involves some kind of exposure to
Yes.
something really difficult.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
think the thing that we want to know isn't that it's it's never going to feel hard, but that if I do something hard like that, if I actually engage with the pain, it's going to feel painful, but it's going to invoke something in me that is incredibly strong and
yeah,
powerful,
important.
important, relieving.
Yeah,
It's going to lead, we're going to dip through the river to the other
we
side.
are. Yeah, absolutely, and that's why
Yeah.
you do need to do the work with someone who is a licensed practitioner so that you don't dig up things too quickly and, you know, without being held appropriately.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay, so what's one thing if they wanted to kind of tune in right now, what could they do right now? Let's say
Yeah.
they're dealing with, let's say, a migraine or a panic attack kind of feeling. What would be like the first little thing they could do differently with that that would help them
Yeah.
pay attention to that and maybe reach out for help?
I mean, I think the first thing is to really acknowledge that whatever the feeling is, the panic or the migraine, um, is a signal that something is going on that needs attention. So not kind of it's a internal stance that shifts. It's more of like, "Oh, hello.
Mhm, mhm,
Hello, panic. Hello, migraine." It's an invitation and an acknowledgement and an honoring. It's
mhm.
sort of different. It's like not a thing like, "Oh, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
like what to say, oh dear, I'm
Uh-huh.
having a panic attack. Let me get over it."
Yeah.
Um, it's like, okay, this is a part of myself, a part, just
Mhm,
not the whole thing. It's a part of myself. It's my anxiety showing
mhm,
up. Hello, anxiety.
mhm,
And then the second thing would be to sort of do a little bit of that, what I'm talking about on your own, the titration in, which is to breathe into it,
mhm,
not breathe away from it
mm,
to try to, you know, to think like for it to go away, but to inhale and exhale into the sensation just a little bit,
mm,
especially the exhale,
mhm,
almost as if you're sending the exhale into the anxiety or
mm,
into the pain.
mm. Not moving away from it.
No,
Yeah.
into it.
Mhm,
And then after that, sort of checking in with your centering and checking in with your here and now, telling yourself, my body is okay right now. I'm sitting in this couch or I'm I'm in this room. I can see there's a window. I'm you sort of recenter yourself in the here and now to
mhm.
kind of bring yourself out of that. So you've brought yourself into it, you've gotten yourself close to it, you've sent your life
Yeah.
force into it, and then you come back and then you tell yourself, "And I'm here. I'm
Mhm.
actually here. I'm not in
Right.
my pain."
Right. So it's like here's the one sensation, which is my head is feeling some kind of pressure. But then there can be this other anxiety about what's going to happen that makes us want to pull away from it. We get afraid of it. Something gets heightened. And even if the pressure is still there in my head or in my chest, there's a holding or an acknowledgement when we breathe in, breathe out that reduces our